should you start thinking about fundraising? Now, I like to always tell my founders to bootstrap as much as possibly can. Now, timing is really important for a founder to be able to hold on to their equity. So the thing is that the later you start this fundraising process, the better off you are in terms of how much equity you get to hold on to in your company. Now, if you are looking for seed investment for your business, then be ready to give up a large share of your equity, because seed investors are the type of investors that actually come really early on in a startup's life. So perhaps you just have an idea here, or maybe just a prototype here. Now, these investors are actually taking a huge risk with your company by investing in your company, and they want to get the right returns for taking such a risk. They are never going to be, someone who's willing to invest in your startup for something like a 2 or 5% equity. They are probably going to ask you something like 35% in equity for that capital. So bootstrap, that's what I would say. Bootstrap for as long as you possibly can in order to hold on to that equity. So the way I look at this and the way, what I understand from my experience here, what I suggest to my founders is, start approaching the investors when the company has at least done the initial market analysis completed and you're seeing some revenue generation. So that is actually the best time to go and seek outside capital when the business is already generating some revenue. Now, I'm just saying revenue. I'm not talking about profits here. All right. But if your business is generating revenue, then that itself is a big validation for the startup that the idea, the product works, and there is a demand for it. So that way you're going to be able to raise larger amount of capital for the least amount of equity. Get your sales strategy set in place, working right. And then you go and talk to an investor and tell them that you need money in order to speed up the sales process. Now, sometimes, and this is very important for startups, that sometimes, these investors can bring so much to a business in terms of growth and opportunities that giving away that equity might seem like a decent idea. The younger the company, the more support it needs. And the right type of investor will not only give you the funding, but will also bring in those contacts, those networks. They will provide introductions, perhaps open you to certain marketplaces, give you that access. So just, for a founder, sometimes that becomes the deciding factor that, a certain investor can bring up all these opportunities and open new doors for the company. So let's invite them, take that funding, let them be a part of the business. Let's give away that equity for those opportunities. But the fact remains that the earlier you start this fundraising process, the more equity you are going to give up. All right. Now, the more rounds of fundraising you're going to have in your startup's journey, the more equity you're going to give up. So think about those things before you start any type of fundraising. How much equity are you willing to give up? How much share do you want to hold on to? Obviously, as a founder, you want to hold on to as much as you possibly can. But then, looking at all the good and the bad and everything that exists around the startup as an opportunity, think about how much you're willing to give up. So those are actually some decisions a founder needs to make and, really think hard about before starting any kind of fundraising. The fundraising process takes a long time. There are very far and few startups that actually, secure funding within the first week. On an average, it takes about 6 to 7 months for a startup to raise capital. So this is all the time a founder will need to spend on doing the research on the different investors, making those connections, building those relationships with these investors, attending tons of meetings, doing the pitches, doing the pitch presentations, the final negotiations, and the signing of the contract. It takes about 6 to 7 months. So be ready to spend that much amount of time on this whole thing. So the goal here is to start the fundraising process a good 6 months, at least a good 6 months before you actually need the fund, before your existing cash dries up at the company, before your existing cash dries up at the business. So this is a very important question, and this is the reason why I have it here at the very beginning of the course. Think hard about how you want to do this, when you want to start this fundraising, and for how long you can resist fundraising for your business.